If every country is in debt, who is the creditor? The hum of printing presses echoes through the night, a mechanical lullaby for nations dreaming of prosperity as ambition stirs from its ancient slumber. This is the quiet before the storm, the fragile dawn where the first tentative promise is made, a promise that will one day curdle into a ghost that haunts the vaults of the world. It begins not with a shout, but with a whisper, the whisper of something for nothing. The seductive myth that a ledger can forever remain unbalanced, that the bill will never, ever come due. This is the spark of ambition. It is the moment an empire or a man looks at the horizon and sees not a limit, but a deficit to be filled with tomorrow's labor. A nation still young in its spirit decides that its future is a form of collateral, a treasure buried in time that it can spend today. It is a vote of confidence in a self that does not yet exist. And so, the first bond is issued. The first signature is scrawled on a parchment that is, in truth, a map. A map that leads not to gold, but to a labyrinth of mirrors. The air is clean with potential. The debt feels like an investment, a bridge being built from the present to a more glorious future. It is an act of faith, a declaration that we will be richer, wiser, more capable tomorrow than we are today. The weight of it is not yet felt. It is a seed, planted in the fertile soil of hope. Then comes the forge of expansion. The borrowed capital, the future brought forward, begins to heat the furnaces of industry. Cities stretch their skeletons skyward. Ships are built not just from wood, but from promises. The empire sells a piece of its soul for stability. Blind to the chains it is so meticulously forging. The debt is no longer a single bridge, but an entire network of roads, aqueducts, and palaces, all leading to a center that grows heavier and more ornate with each passing season. The wealth feels real. It is in the stone and mortar, the silks and spices, the full bellies and confident strides of its people. The creditor is a distant, abstract concept, a silent partner in this great enterprise. The forges glow day and night, their fire reflected in the eyes of the bankers and the merchants, who now mistake the paper representing wealth for the substance of power itself. Their hands, once steady, develop the faintest of tremors, the first, almost imperceptible lie that the system is infallible. But a shadow lengthens. The initial ambition, once so pure, begins to curdle into something else. A quiet hunger sets in. The empire has grown accustomed to the feast, and the thought of returning to a simpler meal is anathema. This is the stage where greed, the quiet religion of progress, begins baptizing fools in rivers of regret. It disguises itself as necessity, as the only logical path forward. To stop expanding is to admit weakness. To stop borrowing is to risk contraction. And so, the system must be fed. The forges must be stoked with more than wood. They must be fed with the very substance of trust. This leads to the veil of debasement. It is the most subtle of poisons, administered not with malice, but with a resigned sigh. When the weight of the promises becomes too heavy for the actual wealth to bear, the promise itself is altered. The coin is shaved. The ledger is tweaked. The printing press, once a tool of measured progress, is asked to work longer hours. The empire begins printing its own tombstones in the ink of endless want. The value that was once inherent, tangible, is now a shared fiction, a story everyone agrees to tell themselves. The gold coin is replaced by paper, and the paper is backed by nothing more than a collective decision to believe. The banker, who once trembled with the first lie, now presides over a temple of paper, his faith placed not in gold, but in the continued credulity of the crowd. This is the great turning, the moment the soul of the enterprise is betrayed. It is a betrayal so quiet, so bureaucratic, that it goes almost unnoticed. The debased coin whispers secrets of this betrayal, but its voice is lost in the clamor of the market. And what a clamor it is! This is the fever of illusion. The world becomes a theater, and everyone is both actor and audience in a spectacular performance of wealth. The market, which once worshipped growth, now kneels before its own shadow. Prices detach from reality and float into the realm of pure story. A man can become rich by betting on the future price of a tulip, a railway, a website. The crowd that once cheered genuine progress now cheers as the vaults run dry, their voices a hymn to the gathering storm. They see their paper fortunes multiply and believe they are masters of the universe. They do not see that they are dancing on a floor made of glass, suspended over a great emptiness. The debt is the architecture of this grand illusion, the unseen scaffolding that holds the entire spectacle aloft. It is the gravity that everyone has forgotten, the force that waits, patient and immutable, for the music to stop. In this fever dream, the question, if everyone is in debt, who is the creditor, becomes a philosophical curiosity, a riddle for academics. It is not yet felt as a threat, but beneath the spectacle a crack forms. This is the fracture of faith. It starts with a whisper, a rumor on the wind. A bank falters. A prominent voice expresses a doubt. The shared story, the collective fiction that underpins everything, develops a hairline fracture. The belief that the paper is as good as gold begins to erode. The tremor in the banker's hand becomes a visible shake. The crowd's hymn of praise falters, replaced by a nervous murmur. This is the most dangerous stage, for it deals not in numbers, but in psychology. An empire can survive a lack of gold. It cannot survive a lack of faith. Faith is the true currency, and it is hyperinflationary. Once its value starts to fall, the descent can be terrifyingly swift. The creditor, once an abstract concept, begins to take on a shape. It is no longer a single entity, but a specter of collective anxiety. It is the sum total of all broken promises, the ghost of every unpaid bill, now massing at the gates. Then comes the flood of folly. The fracture widens into a chasm. The realization dawns, slow and then all at once, that the emperor has no clothes. The illusion shatters. The rush for the exits begins. It is a stampede of pure, unadulterated panic. Paper wealth evaporates into the digital ether from whence it came. The markets that worshipped growth now sacrifice their children to the god of liquidity. The system, built on the elegant, interlocking promise of debt, seizes up. Every IOU is called in at once, but there is no one to pay. The great paradox is laid bare. When every man, every company, every nation is a debtor, the creditor is an imaginary friend who has suddenly, violently demanded his due. The chains forged in the stage of expansion are now felt cold and heavy around the ankles of the world. The flood is not of water, but of consequences, finally breaking through the dam of delusion. Greed turned to dust beneath the weight of its own shine. And finally, the hush of oblivion. The presses fall silent, the markets are quiet. The crowd has dispersed, leaving only the wreckage of their fevered dream. The empire lies still, its grand ambitions now just scenery for the silence. The creditor is revealed not as a foreign power or a shadowy cabal, but as time itself. It is the future that was mortgaged, now arrived, and finding the account empty. It is the relentless logic of mathematics, which does not care for stories or sentiment. It is the void on the other side of the promise. In the ruins, there is a strange, stark clarity. The complex edifice of finance, which seemed so impenetrable, is gone, and what remains are the simple, timeless truths. That something cannot come from nothing, that a promise is a weight upon the soul, and that value must be rooted in something more substantial than hope. The air, once thick with the fumes of ambition and folly, is now clean, scoured by the winds of collapse. The currency may change, the illusion never does. What drowned the galleons of old stirs again in unseen currents. We look at the cracked marble of fallen capitals and see the reflection of our own glass towers. We hear the echo of the same rationalizations, the same hunger, the same faith in our own exceptionalism. We tell ourselves our money is different, our systems are smarter, our debts are more sophisticated, but the human heart, with its capacity for both creation and avarice, remains the true architect of its undoing. The ledger of history is written in the same 7 stages, a cycle as old as civilization itself, a ghost story whispered from one ruined age to the next. Every empire thinks it's different, until the smoke smells the same, and the ruins claim another name. If this story stirred something in you, subscribe to Wealth Rex, where the ruins of money still whisper their truths.